Greetings, listeners. Howard and I spoke with a very special guest. He is the chair and CEO of a 1,200 attorney AM law firm that has grown by staying intentionally U.S. focused, as well as fiercely protective of its culture and disciplined about strategy. We unpacked how they decide where not to grow, how crisis tested and proved their values, and why today's disruption in big law can actually be an advantage for firms that know exactly who they are. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to the Future's Bright podcast. My name is Chris Batz, and joined by my co-host, Howard Rosenberg. Howard and I are at the center of law firm talent and strategic growth here in New York City. Howard is a partner and the head of talent intelligence and acquisitions at Batz and Brunel, and I advise and facilitate law firm mergers at Columbus Street. And today, we have a very exciting guest, Chase Simmons, chair and CEO of Polsinelli. Chase, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, thank you. Howard, good to see you again. Looking forward to talking a little bit today.
So Chase, if you wouldn't mind, give my audience a quick overview of the firm and your current role.
Yeah, so we're about a 1,200 lawyer firm, full service. I think we're either the largest or one of the largest full service U.S. only firms. So we're very much focused while we've got partnerships around the world. We're very much focused on what we think the number one legal market is right now and will be for a long time, which is the U.S. And kind of leading practices, healthcare, real estate, mid-market corporate. We've got an IP practice that kind of pulls in our life sciences and tech into those industries and practice groups. And obviously, again, at 1,200 lawyers and full service, we've got all the other things to kind of make those industries tick. So we're about a little over 50-year-old firm, emanating out of the Midwest. But most of our growth has been, Texas and the coast since I've been chair, last 8 years or so. My role is chairman and CEO. And so I've got the don't practice anymore. That was kind of part of the gig. We thought we needed full-time kind of professional management, but I ran our real estate group for a long time and have practiced at the firm since I was a summer associate. And so, the role is just, all the strategic matters, the C-suite, that business side of the firm comes up to me. You guys know that the interplay between the business side and the legal side is dramatically changed the last decade. And I'm guessing the next decade's even more dramatic change than that. But we've got a lot of other great leaders in the firm, but ultimately they kind of report up to me to the extent that's even a thing in a law firm. It's a little bit like herding cats. And obviously I serve at the pleasure of my partners, so that's a real thing in our firm as well.
And Chase, you mentioned kind of the U.S. centric idea basis. So can you talk about why Polsinelli's chosen to stay primarily U.S. focused as opposed to doing anything on international? Because you're at a size and a scale of the business. Other firms have done that. You have decided not to do that.
Yeah, I think, there's probably a couple of reasons, Howard. And I think for us over time, we need to make sure it doesn't become one of those like principles that doesn't serve a purpose anymore. And so we do, I spend a lot of time in London, for instance, and we've got others, what we call office managing partners, that are chairs at kind of our different regions. But for us, that was the original business plan, was a boots on the ground in financial centers in every region of the country, not every financial center, but every region. And we've accomplished that now, but that was kind of the original plan that we think has worked really well. So that's number one. Number two, as I alluded to, we think it's the most dynamic market. I joke sometimes that like every year the second best market is somewhere else, and so that kind of tells you something. I'd say London is probably the one that's the most perennial, and that's why we spend the most time there. But you can remember it's been China, and it was, maybe until last week, it was Dubai. And, so it moves around a little bit. We've also had a number of people who have joined our firm that are influential in our firm, from other firms that, really made big investments out of the country, and it hasn't gone as well. And I know there's a lot of firms where it's gone very, very well, but I also know that there's plenty of firms that it haven't. And so that's kind and then I think at this point, like the last one, and this is one you really want to make sure doesn't last for too long, is we're pretty popular partner with some firms that no longer have their historic partners are now in their markets competing with them, and we're not doing that. And so for now, it's a pretty fun place to be. And we get to explore some pretty interesting partnerships with people that aren't going to come to the US necessarily and compete with us. They might have a sales office or something like that, and we're not coming to Sao Paulo or London or whatever to compete with them. So that's kind of you know, and you can tell I've answered that a few times because my board and I talk about this, quite frequently.
Chase, let's talk a little bit about that growth because so you took the helm, you shared 8 years ago, you were elected
Right.
chairman, CEO. You replaced Russ Welch, who grew the firm from under 100 attorneys to 800 attorneys. And then you've taken it from there to 1,200. What have you personally, with your team, doubled down on to say we are not compromising on this? You just
Um,
mentioned region strategy, but
yeah. Yeah. The first one, you almost have to say this, but it's really true in our case, is really a cultural idea. I did my first full year, full fiscal year in our firm, or for year and a half was like the first year and a half before COVID. And so if you can think about like what all of us went through during COVID and kind of thinking about what your values are and not knowing what the future holds, it gave our firm a chance early in my kind of tenure. And by the way, there was a number of us that kind of moved into new leadership um, areas and chairs, really took over for mentors of ours in a lot of respects. And so we all kind of came in at about the same time. And that time was a time to, are you who you say you're going to be? Are you who
yeah,
you said you are? Because there were a lot of choices to be made. And so that was number one. We haven't compromised on those things.
yeah.
Um,
And Chase, if I
but then
may,
like
like
some
when you say,
strategic things. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
and when you say culture, what exactly do you mean by culture? Like, what was it about culture you guys didn't want to compromise on?
Yeah, so for the most part, practicing with people that you respect, that you think they have good judgment, that you're proud to introduce your clients to, you're proud to introduce your spouse and your family to. It doesn't mean, at 1,200 lawyers, you got to be best friends with everybody in the firm, but you have to have serious respect for them, not just the size of their book of their business. We don't introduce books of business, we introduce people and character and their and people's teams and all that sort of stuff. So like that's kind of number one, of from a cultural standpoint. And then I think the other piece of it was, um, COVID gave us a chance because you didn't know what the future held and you had to plan. A lot of firms were, including us, you're like wondering how long is the cash going to last. Now thankfully those were only questions for about 45 days, and then we all ended up having really great expansion periods after that. But you asked yourself all those questions, and who takes pay cuts first, and do you furlough staff, and do the associates get their bonuses? And our board and our partnership answered every one of those questions ahead of time of, we're going to protect this firm that we've built. We're going to protect the people that rely on us. And if the partners need to make an investment over a number of years, then that's what they'll do. And so that was like we just come back to that over and over again. At some point, people are going to be like, "Why are you still talking about COVID?" But it was really an important cultural moment for us, at a time where we had a lot of new leadership, and there could have been some uncertainty.
Yeah, yeah. So putting the right people in front of your clients that you want to respect, and then also protect the family that you've
Yep.
created. You had mentioned, I think, strategic. You were about to mention as far as no compromise. It sounds
Yeah.
like U.S. only.
Yeah, I think strategically, like we again, full service firm, you guys deal with you're in, this industry well, diversified financial services company, and it can be sometimes very difficult to stay on strategy. And I think one thing we've been really good at over the last few years is articulating our focus and our strategy, agreeing on it and then articulating it out to our people. And saying, for instance, I started as a land use lawyer. Okay, that was my original practice, and being willing to say to the land use lawyers, you know, w- we're going to support you, but this may not be a big growth focus for a few years, or say that to some part of the litigation department or whatever it may be. That that's what we have not compromised on at all on deciding what our strategy is going to be, articulating it, and hewing fairly closely to it. You can't get too strategy bound where you can't make you can't take an opportunity that you see. But that straightforwardness based on a strategy has been really important to us, I think. And the strategy evolves a little bit, but it's been pretty consistent during that period. And it's a lot like what I described at the beginning of the podcast.
Chase, I was wondering what was the driving force for you to go to law school and practice law?
Oh man, this isn't very I'm gonna say like this isn't very compelling, but I bet it's a pretty similar story to a lot of other people. I literally just didn't have a plan, and knew that I either needed to, get a job or go to grad school. I don't think I was qualified for any jobs. I was a political science and philosophy major, so I was qualified to think deeply about things that you could read in books and all that, and so I decided to apply to a couple of law schools and go to law school and ended up really enjoying it. And it became obviously something that I think I found the right, however I found it. I think I found the right profession, but it wasn't very thoughtful. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. It was just probably a little bit of a continuation of that undergrad political science and philosophy. That's the part of law I was drawn to. Of what are the big questions of the day? How does our society respond to them? Those sorts of things. That ended up not being my practice at all, but that's kind of where I started and what attracted me to it.
And kind of a follow-up question. So as you built your career and practiced law, what was the deciding factor about then moving into management full time? Because that's a big transition. That's a big decision to make for your career. Was wondering what was the driving force behind that?
Yeah, there are probably a couple of things. I mean, one thing I've really appreciated about our firm, and I think we may have been talking about this before we went on the air, but I've I've been at Polsinelli my entire career from a summer associate, and have seen a lot of growth, and that growth has been driven by certainly a strategy, but individual people or groups of people coming forward to leadership over the years and saying, "I'd like to do this. I'd like to expand into this area. I'd like to attract these people that I want to practice with." And we've had a culture of saying yes to that, and with conditions and with not guarantees that it's going to be successful, but guarantees that people are going to try really hard to make it work. And as Russ, who you referenced earlier, Chris, was getting close to the end of his career and stepping down, um, it was just important to me that whether it was me or somebody else, and there were other people I really respected that I think would have been great for the role, that we continue that kind of growth mindset, but growth in service of people who can articulate what they're trying to accomplish and why they're trying to accomplish it, and then get an organization behind them. And I'd say that was like the biggest driver. And then on a personal basis, I had a lot of success in my career. Was at a point where I checked off a bunch of goals and was ready to either set new ones or do something else. And to kind of be able to change careers and stay at the firm that you love and you feel like you've been some small part of building, pretty cool. And I've only had one job that I didn't have to put on sunscreen for, so I wanted to kind of stay in the building. So,
Chase, what keeps you up at night, if anything?
oh yeah. I think like if you're I'm very proud of our firm and what we've accomplished. But we're never satisfied. So there's always something that you see a, a competitor that you admire, and they're making progress in some area. So I'll toss and turn on those things a little bit. Um I will tell you, and then occasionally, we're in the people business, and so you do toss and turn on people, I've been in one firm for a long time, and none of us make it through life unscathed. And you see people go through things that, whether it's family, whether it's health, over the last, since COVID, probably more mental health has been on my mind than it was before. I wasn't as cognizant. And so, like, really thinking about the people that you care about, um, and just sometimes worrying about them. So I'm not every night I'm worried about the same person, but you do have that on your mind. And I think that's both, I just think that's part of it. And in some ways it's rewarding to be able to kind of know the inside stories about what people are doing, and maybe even be able to help them out a little bit. So that's one thing. And then the other one just is the geopolitical environment that we're living through. It could definitely keep you up every single night. Um, we try to have a philosophy of, where do we want to be in 5 years, and how do we keep how do we pay attention to the noise, because you got to respond to it sometimes, but not get distracted by it. So that's probably like, finding that balance is probably a keep you up at night thing right now. And I'm waiting for a 10-year period where there isn't much of that, but it doesn't seem likely to occur anytime soon.
So Chase, talking about the 10-year horizon. So this is kind of an industry question for you, but do you think that the AmLaw hierarchy could look completely different in, say, 10 years' time?
I mean, I almost want to ask that question back to you. It certainly could, in some period of that. That's 10 years is not a short period of time. There's been a lot of movement. The mergers, there's so many of them going on, that that shakes things up. And we have, I'm guessing, over the last 15 years, if you really looked at it, and you guys may study this more than I do, like, there are a few firms, that 15 years ago you wouldn't have put in that, top 10 in the world from a scale perspective or brand perspective or whatever, that you wouldn't have bet on necessarily, that are there now, certainly the last 20 years. So I would anticipate that's not going to slow down. So I think it'll probably continue to keep working. The real question is, are there accounting firms in there, and all that sort of stuff? Is it all law firms, and are we all doing the same thing? I think is an interesting question too.
Let's go there. I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's talk about non-attorney ownership of law firms, Chase. Let's talk about private equity and the implications of that, ABSs, MSOs. How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, on that second piece of it, I mean, first, the part that's not that different, that's been out there for a long time, is the kind of the accounting structure, the consulting firm structure, and there's obviously some overlap between, um, gray areas between companies, even if they weren't trying to get into the same space. So I see that, continuing to accelerate. Um, I think one thing that's interesting about the industry, has been that the very largest firm, for the most part, the very largest firms in the industry, tend to not go down and try to do more commoditized work, or hang on to commoditized work. Um, and accounting firms are not always that way. They've kind of got a different business model. So I think that's an interesting, that I don't know where that ends up, but I think it's interesting to, like, see two kind of business models, coming in with each other. On the private equity of law firms, I'm less, private equity ownership of law firms. I'm The way we think about it is, we're studying the heck out of it and having as many conversations as we have. And I'm actually meeting with an investment bank next week, not to entertain, but to understand. I told them, I said, I don't see any benefit of this to a firm like ours, but like, you're smart people. I'll meet with you and listen to you. Um, I don't get it. The only what but I'm waiting for to hear something clicks. The only part of it I get right now is the attractiveness is for more of a full service firm. I get it if you're a plaintiff's firm or something like that, that needs to scale up and increase your leads or whatever. If AI or some other things become so expensive and the expertise necessary for them really needs to be through partnerships with other types of companies, I can see where a private equity model could help fund that and bridge that. Or if firms have a leadership class that just wants a big payday and um, and change the model for the next generation, I think that'll be attractive to some people. It's not attractive to our firm. Maybe our firm's got too many young people in it right now and they're not ready to retire. Maybe they'll change their mind, in 20 years or something like that. We do tend to be a pretty young firm at the leadership level. But that's my take. Is that, those are one or two things going on. The thing I wish I'd studied more is obviously the investment banks did go through their version of this with the public markets, 25 to 30 years ago. And they've done just fine, and there were reasons that they did it. And the generations behind them they've continued to be attractive. So I do kind of keep an eye on, like, that's one that, they had to have so many of um, the same dynamics that these big law firms have, and yet they made that choice to go into the public markets. So I think it's interesting. I wish I had like a more, you know I know this is going to happen. This is the worst thing or this is the best thing. For us, we study it. We're not very interested in it right now, but I'm not going to just totally ignore it. I think that'd be silly.
It's a really interesting concept as well, because I think, I think Chris and I hear from law firm leaders the whole idea of enterprise value. So you come into the partnership and you usually leave with nothing at the same time. And I think now in this day and age, you work really hard, you put in a lot of hours over your
Yeah.
career, and shouldn't you be building long-term value that, you could follow you or cash it, in terms of building that wealth for partners. That's kind of interesting territory now that this thing is kind of, at least people are talking about it. I don't think anyone has really pulled the trigger at AmLaw 100 level, but it's interesting that it's throwing up a lot of issues like this for the partnership.
Yeah, I mean, Howard, I agree with you. That is the part I get. I don't think it's for us, and to even put our toe into the water on it would be against a lot of the things that we've like preached culturally, because it is important to law firms, at least again in the U.S., because you guys know some of the smaller international firms, and many of them have that model where you can just really never pass it down to the next generation, and that's, I think, what's constrained their scale in many places. And so, but I get the human reaction to that. I'll be honest with you, it's gone in our firm. It's gone as a joke of me going, yeah, when I've served my however many years, we're just going to sell to private equity. We'll all get a payoff, and then the next generation can figure out what's next. I assume that is part of the thinking. So it'll be interesting to see who pulls the trigger on that, but I don't think it'll be us.
So a little bit of a counter narrative, I'll just devil's advocate, Chase, is I think it's actually better for the younger partners, because if your more senior leadership team is selling maybe through an IB, you guys will get some payout, but the real growth story is that it's the second bite of the apple for the younger partners, depending on how long your senior partners stay on board. That the challenge with deals taking place in the United States right now is all the older partners thinking they're getting a huge payout. It's actually not necessarily how it works. You're supposed to be there for the growth story, and it creates a unique thing, which is really stickiness for that talent that you would like to see legacy pass on. So the exciting thing is the younger partners who are hungry and ready to go for it. It's an amazing opportunity because it's a way you really can compound wealth.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like for us, like from our, assuming I'm right and that we're gonna, not participate in that, then that just makes it. We just have to double down even more on something that's really important to us, which is opportunity for the next generation of our partners and lawyers. And the biggest, the biggest insult that you can levy at someone at Polsinelli in the senior ranks is that they pulled the ladder up behind them. And so, if that is where part of the industry goes and we don't follow, it's a little exciting to me that it just puts even more pressure on us to live to those values that we've been talking about for a long time. So,
And Chase, what's happening inside the firm around technology and AI? I mean, Polsinelli is a full service firm. Is there one particular practice group that's really leveraging the power of AI going forward?
I think there's more than one, but not all, Howard. So I'd say our deal lawyers are really leveraging it. Um, I'm probably going to neglect litigation when I say this because I think they, in some ways, litigation in many firms was kind of ahead of the curve on this from a technology standpoint, and even if they weren't truly using AI. But our deal lawyers, we had an associate who created a product that we use and license now. That's really great. It's kind of a, it's a deal product. It's both helping pull old terms and market terms and all that sort of stuff, but also project manage. Our real estate lawyers are using it a lot. Our IP lawyers who work for a lot of the AI companies and are very educated on it. Um, I just had meetings with a couple of them the other day. They're using it a tremendous amount. So I'd say those are probably some of the leaders in our firm. Some of the I'm seeing, I really think this has a great opportunity to bend costs and just make practicing more interesting. The regulatory lawyers, some of the tools that you can put together to have the regulatory changes and the regulatory framework at your fingertips, so that you can then do the important work of analyzing it and advising on it, is starting to happen a little bit more than it had. I actually thought that would be one of the first things. So we're using it a lot. We You didn't ask this question, but I'll just go on for a second. Like we really started from a standpoint of what do kind of kept the IT team a little bit out of it and kind of came more from what are the use cases, what do we need, and built those before we even knew what products were available. And that's kind of turned out to be a good. I'm not sure we knew it was going to work this way, but that's turned out to be a good approach because um, it's moved so incredibly fast. And we've even seen it in the public markets. The leaders change, et cetera. Um, we came out at that direction because we thought this is where we were probably wrong. I thought the big incumbents would control and purchase everything. And so I thought, hey, they're going to be playing around for a while. And I've been meeting with, and by that I mean, and they are all very good, but Lexus and Thomson Reuters and some of those. So we just said, like, well, while they're figuring out exactly what we're going to do, let's figure out what we would like, so that when we meet with them, we can hear what we can hear something and know that we want to follow that or encourage them to do it, like other firms we do pilots. So that's been a good approach for us. The surprise for me has been how many small companies have come up with like really good ideas that are very law firm specific and practice specific. To your point, that's been a little bit of a surprise for me. And a lot of them have remained independent thus far.
Chase, so you guys have grown dramatically, and I believe that's been mostly, if not entirely, through laterals, so groups. You had some
Hmm.
significant groups come over. I think the Philly office was a big win. That was a healthcare team, I believe. Um, I'd love to hear from you. Is that how you guys are going to continue growing? Like, is there a ceiling to US, like your strategy in the United States? Or are you going to start looking at acquisitions? Help me understand a little bit about what growth might look like, and how you guys are approaching it.
Well, the first thing I would say is we're really comfortable at 1,200 lawyers. So our overall scale we're comfortable with. Now, I'm not comfortable when a young group comes to me and says we need a deeper this team, or we need more deal lawyers in this city. Then I go, okay, well we're going to go do that, as long as it makes sense and fits with our strategy. So our growth is going to be driven by the areas that, I told you kind of some of the areas that really drive us strategically at the beginning of the podcast. We don't have the group I'd like in all of those areas in every region where we probably should. We don't have to have it at full service everywhere. We work really well across offices, but if you're in New York and you're not, you know, I mean, you can do anything in New York, but for us, real estate finance is a huge opportunity for us and a huge practice for us. And New York's the real estate capital of the world. If you didn't have the team that you want there, you'd want to build it. So that's going to drive our growth. So to your question, um, although and what I just said probably answers it, that doesn't really, when you're trying to grow that way, when you've got a few little things you want to be deeper in, you want to tie two cities together, a merger doesn't easily fill that. A merger normally could fill that, but then you get four cities you didn't want, you get some redundancies. So we like growing the way we've been growing. Everyone tells us it's not possible. So maybe at some point it'll become not possible to do it that way, but we've really enjoyed it. I said earlier that culture is really important to us. It does allow us to make sure that there's a shared kind of culture, and in many cases you can tell kind of a shared vision too when you're more one-on-one. So I think we'd like to stick with onesies and twosies, as they say, and we like the groups too. We think groups are validating, self-validating in some way. If you see a leadership pipeline in a group, you see how they treat each other, you see what they think about each other. You see how they would like their younger people to be paid, instead of just worrying about themselves. You see all those things, and I think there's some validation to it. So we like doing groups.
Chase, I want to draw on your years of leadership and experience, and it's kind of two in the same question, but in essence, so we have an audience of law firm leaders that listen to us. What advice would you give them as if you were giving yourself when you started the role of chairman and CEO, knowing what you
Ooh,
know
that's
now?
yeah. I would I'm not big on giving advice, but I'd say two things that I needed to learn just for me, and maybe it'll resonate with some other people. Number one, you got to take care of yourself, physically and health wise. Many people probably, I was 45 or something like that when I came into that. And I don't think a lot of 45-year-olds and younger think all that much about their health. But when you hit 50, you need to start thinking about it. And so I'd say
And
that's one. And then the other one is, sorry, go ahead.
no, I say as soon as the clock strikes 50 on the midnight, that's when you begin to worry about this
It's
stuff.
amazing. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And then other people had told me that. And so you need to, and so that's one thing. And I just think that's a lot. There's a lot of people that come into these roles at about that age. That's one. And then the other one is, and this, some people need this advice and some people don't. I think you do need to spend time with other law firm leaders, and certainly other leaders of companies that have some of the similar dynamics to you. I didn't know any law firm leaders, and didn't have a real interest in a lot of law firm leaders when I first took the job. But during COVID, just like with all of us, but you're just trying to figure out what is going on, and what about safety, and what are you seeing in the market, and what about going back to the office, and what are you guys doing on office space, and what are you doing on mental health? Because I think so that really provided a lot of benefits to me to have some people that were willing to talk about those things. Um, and then I think, a little bit of part of that is just, I've been able to kind of find some mentors, when I was 50. I mean, who finds mentors when they're 50? But I think in this profession, people are willing to do it, and so I've been able to find some people. And this is advice for anybody. I tell our young lawyers this, like, it's never too late to find a mentor, and most people are willing to do it. So all those things kind of are something that, I guess it's all personal advice, really, right?
Yeah, no, it's hugely important, and I really appreciate your honesty and just vulnerability about that. Chase, how did you find that peer group?
So I got, so one thing on the legal side, the some of the consultants that we use, we utilize this Weyghauser group, Kent Zimmerman over there. It's been a good friend of mine for a long time. So he's connected us with some people. I was lucky enough to have some people reach out, and to me, and met a few, and one mentor in particular, and I won't use his name, but hadn't been the leader of a firm, but had been a really important leader within a firm. That we just kind of uh, developed a friendship over the years, and so some of them are that way. And then I'm a member of YPO, Young Presidents Organization. I got invited to do that many years ago. There's very few law firm leaders in that, and that's been another way to kind of hear you get out of the law firm bubble a little bit and see other companies. And so that's been my but yeah, it's kind of like trying to give yourself an MBA at midlife, on the fly, so I do think that's what you have to do. I'm guessing most law firm leaders don't go into this with tons and tons and tons of management, and finance and all that experience.
And Chase, last question I have for you is, how do you escape? How do you kind of, get away from the craziness of running a law firm?
Believe it or not, Howard, I spend more time playing golf now than I used to. uh I the weekend hits, and my wife and I play a lot together. But the weekend hits, and I'm like, try to be, if, weather permitting, religious about getting out and hitting balls, and so, or playing. I do a lot less guys golf trips, and I do some client golf, but much less than I did when I was entertaining. So it's really, I'm not riding around having beers. I'm like walking and thinking and just getting away from it. So that's one thing. And then I'll just tell you, like, I don't know, I kind of want to ask everybody how they do this, but I have an iPad, and the reason I'm just thinking about it is I just had to replace it, that does not have my email or text on it. And
Ah, nice.
so
Great idea.
I read books on that, and I fell into that somehow, probably by accident a few years ago. And it's really nice to be able to put my phone and my laptop on the other side of the room, and occasionally I can read the paper on it and stuff too. But like, it's usually the place where I'll read a book, and force myself to read for 20 minutes or something like that. So those are a couple things.
Chase, any books you're enjoying lately or would want to recommend?
So the a book that it's been a year since I've read this, but we just had um Peter Zehan, I think I've got the name right, pronounced right. He just came and spoke at our office in Dallas. And he wrote a book called The End of the World is Just Beginning, where he very much predicted, prior to COVID, so much of what has happened. He didn't name the people that were going to lead it to happening necessarily. This was right after the first Trump administration. But it was really prescient, and we just had him speak. And of course, between the time we had okayed his, kind of general remarks, and when he gave them, the Iran war started. So he had to redo all that. So I would really recommend some of his books, as far as like a geopolitical thinker. It's super interesting. I'll throw that plug out there.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Chase, do me this favor. Please finish this sentence. The future is bright because.
Well, the future is bright because for me, because I have a wonderful family. I've got two daughters who are both in college now, and their future is so incredibly bright. So that's kind of the future. That's on a personal level. And I think for Polsinelli, we just have so much energy and we have so much great leadership and people who are really excited uh, about I want to try not say the future again, but the disruptiveness that's going on in the world. And that question you just asked about what will the top of the legal industry look like in 10 years, the fact that there is disruption and there are questions like that, that's really good for a firm like ours. We don't feel like we were born on third base. We had to hit a double and then steal it. And so we're going to keep doing that. So I think the future's really bright for us as well.
I love that. Chase, how can people find you on social media?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place.
And then Chase, I really appreciate your time today. Appreciate it.
Chris,
Honor and
thank you.
pleasure.
Good to speak to you. Thanks, Chase.
Howard, thanks. It's a pleasure as always.